On a chilly morning in early winter, Emma, a 22-year-old girl who had just graduated from university, was hustling down a small street leading up to an important job interview. In her hand, she held the old frayed file bag, inside of which was her bachelor's degree and the job application papers that she had carefully prepared. Emma understood that today could be an opportunity to change her life, so she was both excited and worried. The bustling morning atmosphere with the smell of fragrant breakfast food and the sound of delivery from the corner of the small market adds to the liveliness of the street. In the rush of people, Emma's eyes suddenly stopped when she saw a thin, small, old woman huddled by an old vegetable on the corner. The old lady wore a tangled sweater. Her face was deeply marked with the wrinkles of age, her trembling hands rearranging the bunches of vegetables that had been soaked by the rain last night. The bunches of vegetables that were still green were now covered in mud, but no one stopped by to buy them. The old woman sat there, her eyes looking tired and helpless, which made Emma feel compassion. Stopping her steps closer, Emma asked softly, "Grandma, do you sell vegetables? Why is it so cold this morning and you are still sitting on the street like this?" The old lady looked up, the hazy eyes of old age looking at Emma with concern. Her voice trembled, both sad and shy. "If you don't sell it, what will you eat? No one buys vegetables grown at home. She is afraid that it will wither for a long time. It is a waste of effort." Hearing that confidant, Emma felt her heart throb. She knows that she herself is also in a difficult period. The money in her pocket is only enough to eat through the day and prepare for the upcoming interviews. However, looking at the image of the old woman sitting huddled in the morning cold, she did not have the heart to leave. "Well, let me buy it for you," Emma said in a gentle voice. She bent down to pick up some vegetables but then stopped, looking at the old woman with resolute eyes. "She wrapped all these vegetables for me. I bought them all." Emma's words stunned the old woman. She hesitated and replied, "Did you say you bought it all? It's a lot. What do you buy it for? It's a waste of money." Emma smiled, pulled out a large bill from her purse and placed it lightly in the old woman's hand. "It's okay, ma'am. I bought it all, you just hold the money, as if I gave you a gift so that you can go home early." The old lady shook her head. Her eyes were both touched and concerned. "No, my dear, you can't take this much. I'm still young. I must be struggling. How can I help you?" But Emma remained steadfast. She grabbed her trembling hands and said softly, "You just take it. Help me a little, I feel much happier." Seeing that Emma was sincere, the old woman did not refuse anymore. With tears in her eyes, she bowed her head in thanks, and her voice choked up, "Thank you. There are still good people like you in this world." She is very happy. "If there is a fate, my grandmother and nephew will meet again later." Emma just laughed, not thinking much about the words. After helping her pack up her vegetables and leaving a few bundles of the freshest vegetables for her to sell, she hurriedly left for the interview. The file bag in her hand was heavier than the bunches of vegetables, but her heart was light, full of joy. She told herself that even if the interview was unsuccessful today, at least she had done something meaningful, making herself feel happy. However, Emma did not expect that it was that small act that would open a big turning point, changing her entire life in the future. After that morning, Emma's life went on as usual. The interviews passed one after another with a lot of tension and disappointment. She still hasn't found a stable job, while her money is running out. However, Emma has no regrets about helping Grace. She often tells herself that, even if she doesn't have enough money, a small act can sometimes make other people's lives less miserable. Late one afternoon, as Emma had just come out of an unsuccessful interview, her phone rang. The strange phone number made Emma hesitate for a moment, but she still picked up the phone. On the other end of the line was a hoarse but familiar voice. "Emma, here's Grandma. Mrs. Grace, the old lady who sold vegetables the other day. Do you remember her?" Emma was surprised but quickly replied, "Yes, I remember, ma'am. How are you? But why do you have your number?" Grace explained that a vendor near the corner of the market had helped her ask for Emma's phone number the day before. Her voice was choked up. "I want to thank you again. Thanks to her grandson that day, she sold all the vegetables and did not suffer a capital loss." She thought that she didn't know how to repay me, so I wanted to invite her over to the house for a simple meal. As a thank you, this unexpected invitation warmed Emma's heart. She happily accepted, promising to stop by her house the next afternoon. On time, Emma found a small alley in the suburbs where Mrs. Grace lived. It is a poor neighborhood with old houses crowded together, but exudes peace and coziness. Emma walked into Mrs. Grace's cottage, with patchy cement walls and an old tiled roof. However, the inside of the house is clean and tidy, showing the meticulous care of the owner. Mrs. Grace happily came out to meet Emma, holding her hand tightly, and her voice was full of emotion. "You're here. Come in, you just cooked some simple dishes." The meal was not fancy, with only a few boiled vegetables, fried eggs, and a bowl of soup, but Emma felt the warmth in every detail. While eating, the two chatted happily. Through the story, Emma learned that Mrs. Grace had experienced a turbulent life. She used to have a well-off family, but a major event occurred when her only daughter went missing in a childhood accident. After years of hopeless searching, she and her husband collapsed. Her husband died shortly afterwards, leaving her to live alone. She had to sell vegetables to make a living, but in her heart she never lost hope of finding her lost daughter. Hearing the story, Emma felt her heart choke. She did not expect that Mrs. Grace, this old and lonely woman, would have to endure such great pain. Her story not only touched Emma, but also opened up a series of unexpected events, changing the lives of both of them forever. During a cozy meal at Mrs. Grace's house, Emma quietly listened to her talk about her traumatic life. Grace, now in her 70s, used to live in a well-to-do family, but the incident occurred when her only daughter went missing in an accident. Even though many years have passed, she still retains the only memento of her daughter, a small silver bracelet with the symbol HN engraved inside. It was the only thing that connected her to her missing child. When she heard the story, Emma couldn't help but be moved. She recalled a special detail from her past. As an abandoned child, Emma is found with a silver bracelet by her side, and she still keeps it as a precious memento. The bracelet was also engraved with the word HN, which coincided with Mrs. Grace's story. Emma's heart was beating fast, and the memories rushed back to make her unable to sit still. Filled with emotion and curiosity, she told her story to Mrs. Grace. When she heard Emma mention the bracelet, Grace was almost dumbfounded. She trembled and said, Can I show you that bracelet?" Emma nodded and promised to bring the bracelet the next day to check it out. The next day, she returned to Mrs. Grace's house with a silver bracelet. When Grace picked up the bracelet, her hands trembled incessantly. She pressed Emma's bracelet next to hers and discovered that they were a couple. On Emma's bracelet, there is not only the symbol, HN, but also a small inscription, "Love you forever." At that moment, Mrs. Grace could not hold back her tears. She hugged Emma. Her voice choked up. "Knock. You are your daughter. You're Knock. How many years have you been looking for me?" Emma also couldn't hold back her tears, feeling the warm love from her biological mother she had never known. The two hugged each other and cried, recounting everything that happened in each person's life. The pieces of memory were gradually reassembled, and there was no doubt that Emma was the lost daughter that Mrs. Grace had been looking for more than 20 years. That moment of reunion not only closes the pain and separation of the past, but also opens a new chapter in their lives. But that is not the end, but only the beginning of a new journey full of challenges and hopes. Emma realized that meeting Mrs. Grace was not just a coincidence, but a fate that had been arranged. After the emotional moment when she realized that Emma was her lost daughter, Mrs. Grace revealed another truth that surprised Emma. She said that before her family fell into poverty, she and her husband used to be the owners of a large company specializing in the production of canned food. It is a business that is on the verge of strong growth. But the incident occurred when they lost their daughter. Both of them no longer had the mind to manage the company. Taking advantage of this situation, a distant relative named William stepped up to help, but gradually took over the company and pushed her family into a situation empty-handed. Mrs. Grace no longer has property or power. Only the pain of losing her child is the motivation to continue living. She sighed and said, "At that time, I was only thinking about finding my child. By the time I realized the truth, everything was no longer mine." Her old eyes flashed with deep sadness, making Emma feel filled with sympathy and resentment. Emma listened to the story with mixed emotions, both sad for her mother and angry at the injustice she had suffered. In her heart, a great determination gradually formed. Emma said to Grace, "Mom, I'm going to help you regain your honor and all that belongs to you. We will not let the bad guys live in silk velvet without paying a price." Although she doesn't know where to start, Emma understands that this is not only about protecting her mother's rights, but also an opportunity to do the right thing. She looked at Mrs. Grace, and her heart was full of hope and strong will. For Emma, this journey is not just a reward, but also a way for mothers and daughters to continue to write a new, meaningful and hopeful story after years of suffering and separation. After being determined to help Grace regain her honor and what belongs to her, Emma begins a thorough investigation into the family's past and the company that has been misappropriated. According to Ms. Grace, the company used to be a large canned food business, but after the loss of their daughter, both husband and wife no longer had the mind to manage. Taking advantage of that opportunity, William, a distant relative, gradually usurped the ownership. Emma spent days searching for old documents, chatting with Grace to piece together details, and leveraging relationships with friends to access information. Through the rare documents Grace still keeps, Emma discovers that the company has grown into a large corporation under William's leadership. The more she learned, the more she noticed that there were many irregularities in the way William ran the corporation. In particular, he took advantage of Ms. Grace's family name to borrow capital when the company started, which could help Ms. Grace restore her legal rights if sufficient evidence is gathered. However, Emma understands that facing a large corporation and someone like William is not easy. When she went to the company headquarters to ask to see William, she was flatly refused because she didn't have an appointment. This experience made Emma both angry and determined. She told herself that she would not stop, but find another smarter and more effective approach. Emma was not discouraged. She continues to gather information from a variety of sources, from legal documents to newspapers to accounts from former employees. With the help of a friend who works in the field of law, Emma began to build legal records to prove Grace's rights. She also discovered that, even though William had taken over the company, he still had weaknesses in his operations and shady financial dealings. This journey is not only a legal battle, but also a challenging battle of wits. Emma knew that this was an opportunity to protect her biological mother and restore justice to the family. Step by step, she gets closer to the truth and is determined to shed light on everything, despite all the difficulties ahead. Emma did not falter, facing the difficulties she faced in her journey to find justice for her family. After gathering enough evidence of the illegal actions of William, who had taken over Grace's company, Emma began to prepare to confront him. She understood that in order to bring the matter to light and reclaim Grace's rights, she needed to work carefully and patiently. With the help of a close friend who works in the legal profession, Emma made a detailed plan to take the case to court. Not only did she want William to pay for what he had done, but she also wanted to clarify all the tricks he had used to steal Grace's family's property. Emma began contacting the authorities, preparing legal documents, and looking for more witnesses who could prove William's fraudulent behavior in managing the company. With each passing day, Emma felt the stress of the situation more and more, but she didn't allow herself to give up. She even began researching business relationships to learn more about the wrongdoing of William and his associates. Emma knows that any piece of information can be an important piece in this fight. Although she felt desperate and tired at times, Emma always reminded herself that she could not give up, because this was not only a legal battle, but also a fight to protect the honor and love that Grace had given her. She understands that change is never easy, but it is her relentless efforts that will help her bring the truth to light and restore honor to her family. With each small step, Emma gets closer to her ultimate goal: to help Grace get the company back, to reclaim lost property, and ultimately to bring justice to the family. With all the evidence and careful preparation, Emma finally decided to go face-to-face with William to demand justice for Grace. One day, when she arrives at the headquarters of the corporation, where William is running, The feeling of being overwhelmed by the size of the company makes Emma feel both scared and determined. However, she does not let external factors affect her goals. Although she didn't have enough evidence to attack him legally, Emma knew she could rely on William's financial misconduct to force him to face the truth. Emma decides to go to see William without going through any prior appointments. She frankly asked to meet with him to explain the illegalities he had committed in the process of running the company. However, this time she was flatly refused, the receptionist coldly saying that without an appointment, she couldn't meet the general manager. The sense of frustration and helplessness of rejection makes Emma more determined than ever. She knew that she couldn't give up right away and had to find another way to reach William. But Emma didn't give up easily. She began targeting close relationships in the industry to find ways to reach out to influencers in William's company. She understands that she has to attack from many sides, not just relying on a face-to-face meeting. She reached out to some former employees of the company, took a closer look at the shady financial practices that William was carrying out, and from there, found weaknesses in the way he ran the company. To deal with someone like William, Emma knew she needed to be smart and patient. Each step she took was a small but important strategy, and she always believed that she could unravel the truth and get back what was lost for Grace's family. Although the road ahead was still arduous, Emma was determined not to give up, because she knew that Mrs. Grace deserved justice after so many years of suffering. After gathering enough information and evidence, Emma begins to implement her strategy to confront William head-on and seek to bring the case to light. She decided to meet him at the corporate headquarters, where she knew he was running well. In front of Emma was a splendid high-rise building, representing the power and wealth that William had usurped from Grace's family. The overwhelming feeling of facing that grandeur did not deter Emma. On the contrary, it made her even more determined in the fight for justice for Mrs. Grace. When she asked to see William in person, the receptionist refused, saying that she would not be able to meet the general manager without an appointment. At the time, Emma felt angry and frustrated, but she knew that it was unacceptable to give up just because of a rejection. Determined not to back down, Emma decided to find a different way to approach him and not let herself be defeated by a simple rejection. Emma understands that dealing with William is not easy, especially since she is just a young girl who does not have much experience in confronting people in power. But she didn't allow difficulty or inexperience to dampen her determination. She began reaching out to people related to the company and seeking information about the wrongdoing in William's transactions. Not only did she rely on existing relationships, but she also expanded her search, digging deep into the old documents that Grace still kept. During that time, Emma was in constant contact with her friends in the legal profession to help with the collection of evidence and the preparation of legal documents. Not only does she want to reclaim the company, but she also wants to expose all of William's mistakes and fraudulent behavior, making him pay for what he has done. She knew that, with her perseverance and determination, Emma would not give up until justice was served and Mrs. Grace regained what she had lost.